While Canadians, and particularly Ontarians, are rightly proud of being a destination for those people who escaped slavery in the United States, there are plenty of gaps in the public's knowledge about the Underground Railroad. For instance, that Toronto was an important hub and that those who came here made substantial contributions to the city. Historian Afua Cooper is the Killam Research Chair at Dalhousie University and co-author of The Underground Railroad. Next stop, Toronto. And she joins us now from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Afua, it's great to see you again. How are you doing?
Likewise, Steve. Thank you. I'm good.
Not at all. Let's start from really first principles here, because I don't want to assume anybody or everybody knows everything about this. The Underground Railroad refers to a system of secret routes and safe houses which enslaved fugitives made their way to freedom from the United States. How did it get its name?
It got its name after 1793, when enslaved Africans would run away from different parts of the United States, mainly from the north, from the south to the north. And one slaveholder said, "Oh my goodness, it's as if they escaped underground because they couldn't find them." So this whole idea of the Underground Railroad, enslaved people running away to freedom, that's where it's got its linguistic beginning.
And let's go back even before that. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, what did that say?
The Fugitive Slave Act basically said, or it empowered slaveholders and citizens at large, white citizens, to track down and run away and track down and, capture people who they deemed were runaway slaves. So it really was a frightening piece of legislation for enslaved people who had escaped from the South, were living in the North, or even free Black people, because many free Black people were captured, because the federal government now said, we're empowering federal marshals and citizens at large to capture you and return you back to slavery. So that caused a huge panic in the Black community in northern cities and villages and towns. So then people said, you know what, we're going to just head straight to the Canadian border and cross over into Canada, into British territory.
So is it fair to say that that act had a significant role to play in the creation of the Underground Railroad?
Well, it certainly expanded it, it enlarged it, it made it a more vital, it breathed life into it. The Underground Railroad was actually quite active, quite animated. But yes, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 really animated it even more. When you look at the literature, they said the border points at Windsor, in the Niagara area, were just bursting with people, children, men and women were just crossing. Hundreds were crossing daily after that piece of legislation was passed in November 1850. And so it really expanded and augmented the Black population in the cities and towns along the border, and also across the lakes. Toronto is across the lake, Kingston is across the lake, or the St. Lawrence River. And so the population in these places got really larger.
Now, as you say, Afua, that was 1850. Let me take you to the following year, 1851. And you note in your book that one of the most important anti-slavery events took place in Toronto in 1851. Tell us about that.
Well, yes, in September 1851, Henry Bibb, who was an abolitionist and a co-founder of the Anti-Slavery Society and the publisher of the first Black newspaper in Canada, The Voice of the Fugitive, called this convention at St. Lawrence Hall, because it's 1851, hundreds of people, thousands of people are coming, have crossed border points. And so the security and the safety of Black people was uppermost in the minds of everyone, especially the leaders. So this convention was called at St. Lawrence Hall to discuss the safety and security of Black people within Canada and also within the United States. Henry Bibb and the delegates concluded that the best place for Blacks in North America fugitive slaves should run away to Canada. That was one of the recommendations. But the best place was the Canadian colonies, and urged people to come to Canada. Not only fugitive slaves, but also free people. Remember, I said previously that free Black people were also kidnapped by federal marshals. If you saw the film 12 Years a Slave, you get an idea of what I'm saying. Kidnapped by federal marshals and taken into slavery. So Toronto was buzzed with dozens of delegates from all over Canada, the United States. There were delegates from the West Indies and the British Isles too that came to discuss the safety and security of Black people in Canada. And Toronto was also a major destination for freedom seekers. So, we know that by the mid 1850s, over 1,000 Black people were living in Canada, in Toronto.
And what made Toronto such a good spot as a terminus on the Underground Railroad?
Toronto was across the lake. You could put people on ferries, cross from Rochester. So Toronto was a maritime destination on the Underground Railroad. You can cross the lake. You can come around from the Golden Horseshoe. It was relatively safe and secure by time, if slave catchers are attempting to capture people in Toronto, it wasn't so easy for them to escape. So it was at a location-wise, it was relatively a safe place to be, and the community was very mobilized. The Black community was very mobilized, and the white community, the white allies, the white abolitionists were also very mobilized and very organized. So Toronto, in many ways, was really a special place.
Now, the Toronto, of course, of 170 years ago is not the Toronto of today. It was a very, very small city. Frankly, didn't go much north of College Street back then.
Right.
But the question is, did most Black settlers at the time settle in the inner city, or did they go to the outskirts?
Most Black settlers were in the inner city. But of course, the outskirts were happening, the liberties. These were the liberties. So if you think of Bloor and Bathurst, that area was one of the liberties, or today we would say the suburbs. Can you imagine a farm at Bloor and Bathurst? Think of that. But there were farms there at the time. So you had many Black settlers settling in the outskirts, in the Don Valley area. It was called the Township of York. So you had the city of York and then the Township of York, which was where the outskirt suburbs would be. But by and large, most people settled in the core. There was strength in numbers. In the core, especially along King Street east from Yonge Street, you had the Black businesses. It's tremendous when you think of the type of Black businesses that were there: restaurants, hotels, barbershops, ice cream parlors, dress shops. It was quite tremendous. It was the heart of the Black business community, and people lived around those businesses in the city.
Give us some added insight, if you would, into what the difficulties would have been for Black people then to set up their own businesses in this new home of theirs in Toronto, or others, for example, in farming or trying to get jobs, etc.
Yes, absolutely. Many of the freedom seekers who came, for example, the Carey brothers, they came from Virginia, and they set up barber shops, ice houses, which were like, restaurants, snack shops, ice cream parlors. But they came with resources. They came with financial resources. Back in Virginia, they were established, and when they came, they were not fugitives from slavery. They were freedom seekers in one sense, because life and liberty and their security as free people were compromised in the United States. So they came over to Toronto, but they came with resources. Then you have someone like Anne Maria Jackson, who was a washerwoman who came and lived in St. John's Ward with her 7 children. Didn't have the kind of resources, financial resources that the Carey brothers had. So she used the skills that she had deployed in slavery, the skills of a washerwoman, and she set herself up as a washerwoman. Poor, lived in a frame house on Elizabeth Street. Her husband had died, took care of her children. Within the farms, what you had in the farming areas was that members of the Black community, those who wanted a rural life, those who were farmers before, came together. So when you think of the Refugee Home Society in Essex County, or the Elgin settlement, in around Chatham, Buxton settlement, the Wilberforce settlement around London, Ontario. People banded together, people pooled their resources, and people collectively bought land so they could establish themselves as farmers. So there were several avenues that people took in order to establish themselves. But Steve, after 1850, I would say 1850 to 1855, when you had the rush of people crossing the border, it was very difficult because many people came really with just their clothes on their backs. And they had to be assisted, they had to find work, they had to be given food. So those first 5 years were really emergency years. But within the community, you had Black and white abolitionists working together, and they created organization. They created mutual aid societies. They created, for example, in St. Catharines, Harriet Tubman was one of the co-founders of the Fugitive Aid Society. And so people pooled their resources. That was the wonderful thing, how people networked and worked together for the elevation and the benefit of those who were crossing the borders and seeking to establish themselves in their new home.
Now, of course, the American Civil War didn't start till 1860, so we're still in the 1850s as we have this conversation. At what time did the Underground Railroad really have its largest numbers crossing the border to Toronto?
Those 10 years, 1850 to 1860.
Before the war.
That was, yes, pre-Civil War, just before we had the largest amount of people crossed during those 10 years and established themselves during those 10 years. 1850 was really a crucial year.
Understood. Let's do an excerpt from the book here, shall we? Sheldon, I'm at the bottom of page 3. Here's an excerpt from the Underground Railroad, Next Stop, Toronto. Toronto, you write, was unique in 19th century Canada in that the public schools and schools of higher learning were always open to Black students. In most parts of the province, Black immigrants to Canada were forced to found and support private schools because local officials barred children of color from the public schools. Parents sent petition after petition to government officials demanding that schooling be made available, often with little result. I guess I want to know, Afua, why you think Toronto was sort of so far ahead of the curve on this issue compared to the rest of Ontario or Upper Canada, as I guess it would have been called.
Yeah, it's hard to say. In Chatham, in Windsor Sandwich, you had an educated segment of the Black community. What I mean, people like the Carey brothers, the Bibbs, and so on. So you found that layer of the Black community everywhere, in every city, in every town, in every village. So to say that because Toronto had a large body of educated Black people, I don't think the answer would be that. Maybe partially, part of the answer could be found in that. I'm still trying to figure out why that was so. It could be also because the leaders of the city of Toronto, people like the various mayors, the pastors, the white people in the Anti-Slavery Society, many of the power brokers had a quote-unquote enlightened mind. So we did not have segregated schooling in Toronto, and that's still something we're discussing and talking about, because I'm not sure why. The kind of racism that you had in places like Chatham and in Windsor Sandwich, London, Ontario, you didn't have it to the same degree in Toronto. So that made Toronto really special and unique. So Black children could go to school, could get an education without the difficulties that they endured in other parts of the province.
Let me follow up on that and ask this. Do you think Toronto is still ahead of the curve when it comes to Black history and education?
Absolutely. Toronto has always been a leader And again, I can't say it because it had the largest Black population. When you look at Chatham, there were over 2,000 Black people in Chatham. Maybe just a more enlightened set of people came to Toronto. Hard to say, saying that on TV. Some people may take issue with that. Or the power brokers in Toronto were more enlightened. It's interesting, and it's something we may never get the answer to, but it's something worth pondering.
I want to show you a picture of a beautiful stamp that Canada Post issued just a few days ago. This is Chloe Cooley, and this stamp honors her. And I wonder what the significance, look how beautiful that looks. And she looks so strong as she looks off onto the horizon. What is her significance to the story of Black history in Canada?
Chloe Cooley is just one of my favorite people. I remember in 2007 when I coordinated for the province of Ontario, the bicentenary commemorations. And Chloe Cooley was one of the people that I recommended that the Ontario Heritage Trust plaqued. So she was plaqued after 2007. Her plaque is on the Niagara Parkway, right at the spot where she was taken in that boat, rowed across the river from Ontario into New York State, and sold to slaveholders into New York State. Hugely significant, this woman, because her story of, being sold by her slaveholder into the United States and the resistance that she made, we're told that she screamed violently and made resistance. As Adam Vrooman, her enslaver, tied her up and threw her in the boat. And the story was taken to Governor Simcoe. At that time, the capital of Ontario was Newark, which is in the Niagara area. And Simcoe vowed to end slavery in Canada, or Upper Canada. He was not successful in ending slavery, but he was successful in passing the act that limited slavery. That is by banning the further importation of enslaved people into the province. So July 1793, the act was passed in the Upper Canadian Parliament that limited, or I should say banned, the new importations of enslaved Africans into Upper Canada. It was because of Chloe Cooley. And what it did, this act, was to open up Upper Canada as a free space for new enslaved people running away, or foreign people. So I should say people coming from the United States who were enslaved. They knew if they made it to Upper Canada, they would be free. They could find freedom because Upper Canada was now free soil. The act, Steve, did not free one Upper Canadian slave. Remember, it banned the importation of new people.
No, that's an important distinction.
The enslaved people in Upper Canada still remained in their status as slaves, but it opened up the province as a free soil for foreign slaves, and foreign we mean, in this case, the United States. That was the beginning of the Underground Railroad, because enslaved African Americans knew, hey, if we make it to Upper Canada, we could be free. So here it was this woman, the body of this woman, I argue, upon which the Underground Railroad was built. So Chloe Cooley, I'm so pleased at the recognition that she's getting, because we know she screamed violently and made resistance when her enslaver tied her up with ropes, manhandled her, threw her in the boat, and rowed her across New York State, where slavery was still legal in New York State. And he sold her into that. So in a way, people think of enslaved people coming from America into Upper Canada. That's true, Underground Railroad. But before that era, Steve, enslaved Upper Canadians were oftentimes sold across the border into New York State and into Michigan. So Chloe Cooley embodies that kind of paradox for us, but she also embodies the resistance that enslaved people made to in gaining their freedom, or attempting to gain their freedom. So the stamp, I think it's a beautiful learning opportunity for teachers and educators. So look at the stamp, how you can teach your students. What does this mean? what's the meaning of this, having this Black woman on the stamp? So we made a plaque for her through the Ontario Heritage Trust. She has been the subject of a Heritage Minute by Historical Canada, and other honors have been given to her. So the stamp is beautiful, as you said.
It sure is. Afua, just finally, if people want to know more about Black history in Canada, what is one resource besides your very fine book that you would point people to?
I can think of, Steve, the Canadian Encyclopedia. There are numerous wonderful learnings on that site, and it's online. People can just go there. There's also, Historica Canada. They have done a lot of great work, a lot of knowledge mobilization on Black history. It's online, great for teachers, great for students and everyone in the public.
Afua Cooper, we really want to thank you a great deal for coming on to TVO tonight and telling us all about your new book, The Underground Railroad, Next Stop, Toronto. Take good care, and thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve. You too. Bye-bye.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.